There's something about leaving Pops that feels bigger than just pulling out of a parking space. That 66-foot soda bottle right over there, it's one of the newest icons on Route 66. Opened in 2007, Pops became an instant landmark. With more than 700 different kinds of sodas lining the walls inside, travelers from all over the world have stopped right here. But most people stop here, take their photos, grab a drink, and turn around. Today, we won't. Today we follow the Mother Road west, out of Arcadia and into Edmond and right to the edge of Oklahoma City. Because Route 66 doesn't end at a gift shop. It keeps going. And so do we. My name is Ken, but my friends call me Ken Dog, and I'm inviting you to join me as I travel down the Mother Road, Route 66. Alright, we're back on Route 66, rolling west out of Arcadia. If you're new here, I'm Ken, and you're on Route 66 with me. We just left Pops behind us, one of the newest icons on the Mother Road, and now we're heading straight towards Edmond and then on to the Oklahoma City line. This is one of those stretches that doesn't always get talked about, but it tells a huge story about how Route 66 evolved. In just a few miles, we're going to watch the Mother Road change from quiet Oklahoma farmland into the edge of a major American city. And that transition, that's Route 66 in a nutshell. So let's take this mile by mile. We're a couple minutes west of Pops now, and you can almost feel the atmosphere shift immediately. The neon glow fades behind us, the traffic lightens, and Route 66 settles into something quieter, something older. This stretch doesn't always get attention. It's not flashy. There aren't giant roadside attractions every mile. But this pavement carries layers of history most drivers never even notice. When Route 66 was commissioned in 1926, it wasn't built as one continuous brand new highway. It stitched together existing roads, farm roads, trade routes, connectors between rail towns. Through central Oklahoma, many of those routes were already in place long before the highway had a number. Early motorists would even have encountered narrow lanes, rough surfaces, and long stretches without services. Concrete paving didn't become consistent until the 1920s and early 1930s. Before that, rain turned portions of the road into mud. Dust could hang in the air for miles. And those painted center lines? Those weren't standard yet either. Drivers relied on instinct, courtesy, and eye contact when passing others. Two vehicles meeting on a narrow stretch required cooperation, not striping. That's a different kind of driving than what we're used to today. As we continue west, you might notice the subtle changes in surrounding. Fewer wide open fields, more rooftops, more developments gradually pressing towards the road. For decades, Edmond separated Oklahoma City by a visible space, farmland, open prairies, pockets of trees. Route 66 would have felt like a connector between those distinct communities. But in the second half of the 20th century, the separation began shrinking. After World War II, America experienced explosive suburban growth. Improved highways, affordable automobiles, and economic expansion changed how people would live. Towns like Edmond transformed from small railroad communities into commuter cities. And Route 66 played a role in that transition. Even before the interstate system, this was the primary corridor into Oklahoma City from the north. Traffic that today would be split across multiple highways once funneled directly through here. Then came a new layer of transportation. Up ahead, we're approaching Interstate 35. When the interstate system was authorized in 1956, it marked a turning point in American travel. The goal was speed, efficiency, and long-distance connectivity. Where Route 66 passed through towns, Interstates often went around them. But here in central Oklahoma, I-35 didn't completely abandon that corridor. It paralleled it. Transportation planners tend to follow logic that already works: rail lines, river crossings, established population centers. So I-35 runs not far from where older routes had already proven successful. The result is something interesting. Route 66 wasn't erased here, it was absorbed. Instead of becoming a ghost alignment, this stretch remained relevant. Local traffic still use it, businesses still line it, growth expands around it rather than away from it. That's not true everywhere along the Mother Road. In some states, entire segments were bypassed and left behind when the interstate opened. But here, because Edmond and Oklahoma City continued growing, the old highway became part of a larger metropolitan grid. As we get closer to the overpass, take a look at the layering out in front of you. Above, Route 66, born in the automobile boom of the 1920s. Below, Interstate 35, a product of the Cold War era and the push for national defense highways. Two generations of American infrastructure crossing at the same point. One built for two-lane travel and roadside commerce, the other built for speed and long-haul efficiency. If you were driving this stretch in the 1940s, everything north and south of here would have been flowing directly along roads like this. No overpass, no elevated lanes, just intersections and open sky. Today, thousands of vehicles an hour cross below the point, never touching the Mother Road. And yet, Route 66 is still here, still drivable, still woven into daily life. That's one of the fascinating things about this corridor. It doesn't scream history, it just quietly carries it. And in a moment, we'll pass over I-35, one of the busiest north-south interstates in the country, while continuing west on a road that predates it by 30 years. As we pass over Interstate 35 here, it's worth mentioning something quickly. If we were to turn left right up here and head south, we would have been following a later era alignment of Route 66. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, as Oklahoma began building portions of the interstate system, sections of Route 66 traffic were shifted onto these newer, faster roadways. The idea of modernization with wider lanes, controlled access, fewer dangerous intersections was appealing to most. So for a time, what is now I-35 carried part of the Mother Road story. But we're staying on the surface alignment, this version that runs through town, because this is where Route 66 feels most alive. Now as we continue west, you can see the environment's changing. The open spacing between buildings tightens up, traffic signals become more frequent, neighborhoods start to fill in the gaps. We're entering Edmond. Unlike small towns along Route 66 that struggle after the interstate era, Edmond grew steadily. Its proximity to Oklahoma City made it attractive for families who wanted space without being far from downtown jobs. In the early decades of Route 66, Edmond was still very much its own small community, anchored by rail service and agriculture. The highway connected it, but it didn't overwhelm it. That all changed after World War II. America entered the automobile boom years. Car ownership skyrocketed, roads widened, commutes lengthened, and towns like Edmond began transforming from rural hubs into suburban centers. Route 66, which once brought long-distance travelers through town, gradually became a daily use corridor for local residents. As we move further west, this road becomes Broadway, the main north-south spine through Edmond. That's another common Route 66 pattern. What started as cross-country traffic often evolved into a town's primary commercial street. Gas stations became storefronts, tourist courts became apartment buildings, diners became coffee shops. The highway adapted. And that adaptability is one reason Route 66 has survived in places like this. Another thing that shaped Edmond's growth was education. In 1890, just a year after formal settlement began, what would become the University of Central Oklahoma was established here. Over time, that institution anchored the city's identity. College towns tend to grow differently. They stabilize, they attract infrastructure, they bring consistent population cycles. By the time the interstate system was fully operational in the 1960s and 70s, Edmond wasn't fading, it was expanding. And instead of bypassing it entirely, modern development layered itself around the old highway. So today you get this blend: historic Route 66, mid-century commercial strips, modern subdivisions, and interstate traffic running just to its east, all coexisting. If you were driving the same stretch in the 1940s, you would have seen fewer traffic lights and far more open land between here and Oklahoma City. If you were driving it in the 1970s, you would have seen some active widening projects, shopping centers going up, neighborhoods starting to push outward. Today, it just feels continuous. But underneath it all, this pavement traces a line that's been guiding movement west for nearly a century. And as we continue towards the older part of Edmond, the architecture starts shifting slightly. A little more historic, a little more rooted. Up ahead, we're getting close to one of those early institution anchors of the community, the old schoolhouse. And that building tells its own story about how quickly this area matured from prairie crossroads into established town. So we'll keep rolling west and step back a bit in time in just a moment. As we continue west here, Route 66 begins to feel less like a highway and more like part of the city itself. This alignment for decades has functioned as both a local main street and a piece of a national highway. Up ahead is the University of Central Oklahoma. What makes the intersection of roads here in campus interesting is timing. The university was founded in 1890, originally as a territorial normal school, a teacher training institution. That means it predates Route 66 by more than 3 decades. So when Route 66 was commissioned in 1926, it didn't create Edmond's educational identity. It connected it to the rest of the country. Students arriving by rail in the early years eventually began arriving by automobile. By the 1930s and 40s, Route 66 was one of the primary access routes for regional travel. Families bringing students to campus would have driven this very corridor. In many towns along Mother Road, Route 66 supported tourism. Here in Edmond, it supported education. That's a different kind of traffic. Not just cross-country adventurers or westbound migrants, but students, faculty, visiting speakers, athletic teams. This highway fed energy into that campus. As the enrollment grew in the mid-20th century, so did the surrounding commercial activity. Bookstores, diners, service stations. Many positioned themselves along Broadway because that's where both local and highway traffic flowed. Another interesting layer here is architectural. University campuses tend to anchor stability. While highways evolve and businesses turn over, institutional buildings remain. So as Route 66 modernized around it, widening lanes, adding signals, adapting to heavier traffic, the university provided continuity. That continuity helped Edmond transition from small railroad town to established suburban city without losing its identity. As we continue west here, traffic moves steadily. Businesses line the road, and it feels much more like modern Oklahoma City corridor. But tucked away just off this roadway is something that predates it all. Before traffic signals, before Route 66, before statehood even, this community was already building for the future. Up ahead on the left is a structure that's been standing there since 1889. It doesn't dominate the skyline, but it's one of the most important surviving buildings in Edmond, and you'll see it just ahead. There it is on the left, the Edmond Territorial Schoolhouse. That building we just passed opened in 1889 and became the first public school in Oklahoma Territory. Classes were held there while the town itself was still taking shape. Education established almost immediately in a brand new community. Over time, the building outlived its original purpose, survived modernization, and was preserved as a historic landmark rather than replaced. Long before Route 66 brought cross-country travelers through Edmond, that schoolhouse was already anchoring its neighborhood. And nearly a century later, when the Mother Road was designated, motorists were driving past that building that was already part of territorial history. Just think about that for a moment. That means that schoolhouse has watched wagons, early automobiles, and Route 66 travelers roll past it for generations. As we sit waiting for this light to turn green, let me point out to you that right here on our right is the Sunnyside Diner, now a local breakfast and brunch spot. But long before it was a restaurant, that site served travelers along Route 66 right here as a gas and service station, part of the everyday roadside culture that made the Mother Road thrive. So right now we are taking the left onto Broadway. We are right in the heart of Edmond along historic Route 66. As we head south on Broadway, this is where Route 66 truly blended into daily life. When the highway was designated in 1926, towns like Edmond didn't build around Route 66. The highway followed streets that were already established. Broadway was the natural spine of the community, so the Mother Road simply adopted it. This meant travelers didn't bypass Edmond, they passed directly through its center. By the 1930s and 40s, this stretch would have been lined with service stations, cafes, small motor courts, and storefront businesses catering to both locals and long-distance travelers. Unlike rural stretches of Route 66 that felt isolated, this portion carried constant interaction, travelers mixing with the local residents. And because Edmond sat just north of Oklahoma City, it benefited from its proximity. Drivers headed into the state capital passed right through here. That steady flow helped stabilize the downtown economy even as transportation patterns changed. Another interesting thing about this stretch is scale. Broadway isn't oversized. It isn't designed like a modern highway corridor. It feels like a town street, because that's exactly what it is. Route 66 adapted it, not the other way around. So as we continue on down Broadway, there's something up ahead that perfectly captures the playful side of Route 66. It's not historic in the territorial sense, and it's not tied to the railroad or early statehood, but it has become one of the most photographed landmarks in Edmond. Coming up on our right, you'll see a bright blue hippopotamus that has quietly turned into a local icon. And there it is on the right, the Blue Hippo of Edmond. The Blue Hippo started as a simple roadside art piece, a fiberglass statue that stood out well because, it's a giant blue hippo sitting along historic Route 66. Over time, it became a landmark. Locals decorated it for holidays, visitors stopped for photos, it showed up in social media posts and travel blogs all over the world. What began as something so whimsical evolved into a recognizable stop along the Mother Road. And that's so very Route 66. Not every famous stop along this highway was planned or commissioned as a major attraction. Some became famous simply because they were different, something unexpected that broke up a drive. The Blue Hippo carries on that tradition. In an era when many historical highways faded into ordinary roads, landmarks like this keep the personality alive. They give people a reason to slow down, pull over, and engage with the road instead of just passing through. It may not date back to the 1920s, but it fits perfectly into the culture Route 66 created, a road where the unusual becomes memorable. And as we continue southward towards Oklahoma City, it's a reminder that even in growing suburban corridors, the Mother Road still leaves a little room for fun. We are just south of the Blue Hippo just a little bit, and this stretch of Route 66 shows a different personality than what we've experienced east of town. Out there, the highway felt transitional. Here, it feels embedded. One of the things that makes Edmond's segment of Route 66 unique is that it never developed into a heavy tourist strip the way some 66 towns did. You won't find rows of neon motor courts or giant roadside trading posts here. Instead, Route 66 becomes practical. It becomes everyday. In the early automobile era, towns competed to attract travelers with spectacle. But Edmond's proximity to Oklahoma City meant it didn't have to rely on through tourism alone. It already had built-in movement, commerce, education, and regional travel. So while other Route 66 towns leaned hard into the flashy roadside culture, Edmond evolved more quietly. That's why driving through here feels like driving from any place, like, from Arcadia to Clinton, or vice versa. This isn't preserved nostalgia, it's lived-in history. Another interesting layer here is timing. By the 1930s and 40s, as car ownership expanded, Broadway became a social corridor. Saturday evenings meant cruising, teenagers driving up and down slowly this exact same stretch, showing off their new cars, meeting friends, turning the highway into a gathering space. Route 66 wasn't just about westbound migration, it was about a local ritual. Imagine this street in 1955. Chrome bumpers reflecting storefront lights, radios playing through open windows, drive-ins and soda fountains within walking distance. That energy shaped how Edmond experienced the Mother Road. And because this segment sits just north of Oklahoma City, it functioned almost like a gateway. For travelers coming from Kansas, this was the psychological threshold before entering the state capital. For residents heading north, it was an exit point, the beginning of an open highway. The dual identity, gateway and hometown street, gave this stretch a steady rhythm for decades. You'll also be noticing something subtle as we drive: the road width. Broadway here doesn't balloon into oversized highway proportions. It holds its scale. That preserved its workability even as traffic increased. Many Route 66 corridors were widened dramatically or rerouted entirely. This one adapted without losing its shape. And that preservation of scale helps maintain character. Even as Edmond expanded rapidly in the late 20th century, adding subdivisions, schools, commercial centers, this spine remained recognizable. The businesses changed, the traffic lights certainly multiplied, but the alignment stayed. That kind of continuity is rare, but it's part of why Route 66 in Edmond feels less like a relic and more like a foundation. Another playful detail, this stretch has quietly appeared in countless graduation photos, prom photos, and engagement shoots over the years. Why? Because it's iconic without being overwhelming. It's historic without being staged. It's Route 66, but it's also home, and that balance is hard to manufacture. As we continue south, you can feel the city beginning to lean more towards Oklahoma City's influence. Traffic patterns shift, commercial density increases, the line between Edmond and the metro area softens. Route 66 doesn't announce this change dramatically, it just flows into it. That's something a lot of first-timers don't expect. They imagine Route 66 as rural, isolated, stuck in time. But in places like Edmond, it's integrated into modern life. Commuters drive it every morning, students cross it every day, families shop along it every weekend, and through it all, it still carries the name Route 66. That's not nostalgia, that's endurance. Up ahead, we'll be taking a turn towards Kelly Avenue, another corridor that connects Edmond to the broader Oklahoma City metro. But for this stretch right here, you're seeing how the Mother Road doesn't always stand apart from a city. Sometimes it becomes its backbone. And that might be one of the most fascinating versions of Route 66 that there is. We're going to be making a right turn here, leaving Broadway and continuing west on Kelly Avenue as Route 66 begins shifting alignments again. Just ahead, up a block, we'll take that left onto Kelly. And there it is, turning left onto Kelly Avenue, continuing to trace the Mother Road as we work our way towards Oklahoma City. Today we left Pop's and its iconic 66-foot-tall soda bottle in Arcadia, rolled across the open stretches between towns, passed over the interstate that later carried part of Route 66's story, moved through the heart of Edmond, along its university, its historic schoolhouse, and even a bright blue hippo. This stretch showed a different side of the Mother Road, not flashy, not frozen in time, but woven into everyday life. Thank you for riding along with me through Edmond on historic Route 66. This has been Ken's Route 66 adventure, and I will see you on the next mile of Route 66, which begins right here.